Okay, so welcome to the Node.js Build Working Group team meeting for July 28th. We'll follow the agenda that was posted with some additions as well. First of all, does anybody have any announcements that they'd like to share before we get started?
I suppose I can share one. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, so we have been donated to Apple Silicon development transition kits from Mac Stadium. They now exist in a job in CI and it's waiting on one PR to land the initial support, and then that can go into the regression runs. So then we can start testing for the new Apple Silicon hardware, which was nice. So it was kindly donated to us by Mac Stadium, and that's pretty much all set up and ready to go.
That's great. So the one PR that's landing, that's the PR that applies the changes that we need to build and test on that?
Yeah, so it was opened by Evan Lucas, and the key things are adding to the configure JP and the OpenSSL updates that are needed, the patches that are needed.
Okay. Updates, we start building. I guess we could also have a discussion on that front in terms of, maybe we'll leave that to the agenda, but we could add that to the agenda in terms of what we think we want to do longer term in terms of builds. Like, do we want to have two builds for OS X, one with bigger binaries, or what makes sense? But I'll put that as an addition to the agenda.
I think benchmarks would be interesting as well for like performance regressions.
Right.
Would be pretty new land, I would guess.
Yeah. Now, do you mean beyond the like the built-in benchmarks that we have within Node? The benchmarking workgroup itself is pretty much defunct. We've agreed to decharter it.
Right. Okay.
So in terms of people who are sort of around and willing to help with benchmark side of things, I think there's still, I mean, certainly the benchmarks in Node Core itself are pretty active. The challenge we always had with those is because they're micro benchmarks, it's kind of hard to tell, like running them all, you'd end up with a big number of numbers that might be up or down, and knowing whether that's good or bad would be not necessarily straightforward. But certainly worth thinking about.
Yeah, I guess at least the regressions would be interesting. Not necessarily, you know, is it fast?
Yeah, like, is it going to be significantly different? Yeah, and I guess well, yeah, we'll flip onto the agenda. We can use that. We'll have one where we can dive into that too. Any other announcements before we get started? I guess also just many thanks to Mac Stadium. They've been a great partner helping us on that front. So it's certainly letting us get to this much faster and get some testing in early, which is good. Okay, moving on to the issues that were tagged. The first one is number 2389, auditing at Node.js Platform Windows. I think so. Rich opened that one. I don't know if there's too much to discuss on that one. It was tagged for the agenda. He was just asking, who's, for active stay or remain to stay in that platform. We've got a couple. Well, we actually got 5 people who had said stay, so I don't know if there's anything we wanted to talk about on that front today.
I can add on a similar vein. I've almost finished up the auditing of the Build and Jenkins group. There was only 4 people that didn't get back to us for Build membership and 1 for Jenkins admin. So I'm in the process of removing them. I think, Michael, I'll get you to help me out with that because you have admin access over the teams. I can't remove them from the teams, but I can do all the secrets and stuff.
Yeah, will do. So I'm just going to take that out there and play audit of build. Okay, so the next one we had was a Grafana update. So I guess, Johan, take it away.
Sure thing. So I think the main news here is the fact that I was reaching out to the Grafana company about getting access to a plugin they have, which is for enterprise, which basically syncs the teams in GitHub with Grafana itself. It doesn't do that by itself, just by adding the credentials. So I guess I should add that as well, actually. So the first thing I did was to seek access for an OAuth app in GitHub, so we can actually access our org structure and the teams. But that is not enough for us to actually inherit all of the team information. So in order to maintain that, we need a plugin. And I reached out with a little help from the OpenJS Foundation to Grafana, and they were interested in helping out. So they are very likely sponsoring this, and I'm in talks with them right now about it. So with that, we can achieve what we wanted to do, which is basically allowing a bigger community to create dashboards. I think there's two parts, or there's a few parts of the work here. One is, collecting more metrics. Here, there's obviously more limited who can help with that, but the simplest part is, for instance, on most platforms that are supported by Go, we can install Telegraph, which is the resource collectors. It collects information about the hosts and other things as much as we want to. So this, I think, if we can get it into our playbooks, and if we can just plug into servers that, like, first layer are very vital to us, and then second layer just to improve, the alerting experience of servers, that would be great. The second part is obviously building dashboards that helps us express different types of importance. And this is where I think we can actually have many more people contribute. As we know, there's a lot of data being collected, so I'm sure that there are things here that isn't just necessarily up or down related, but also could be interesting to express. And then obviously there are other things we can start looking into once we have this in place. But that's kind of the path. So I expect that within a week or two, we're probably going to have a pretty good setup going that can tell us if we have, for instance, disk issues, CPU issues with servers. As I mentioned last time, this is at least how I was able to correlate, performance between our CDN and our WW server in terms of the WW server going down, and so it's very helpful from an infra perspective. So I think the sooner we can get these basic metrics visualized and alerted, the more people we can have helping out with doing something about it.
That sounds good. One question I had is for the Grafana metrics machine, do you have Ansible templates for that?
Yeah,
or?
so I have a work in progress, so that's coming.
Okay.
I think my first step was make it work,
Yeah.
and then second do that. But the good thing here is that we're basically just adding a few Debian packages from different sources, so it's relatively simple to set up and maintain.
Okay. Yeah, I was just thinking that's one good way to do handover if you needed help getting some of those Ansible templates finalized. Dash might have some time to help out on that front. Okay.
Yep.
More progress ones. Okay. Anything else that you want to share on that one, or questions from the rest of the team?
That's about where we are, at least.
No questions from anybody else? No, okay, let's move on to the next one, which was processing download metrics in GCP. I know, Ash, you've been working on that. Do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so I sat down with Beth Griggs a couple of weeks ago, and we cracked out and got it working. It now will be triggered from a file being uploaded. It will process the file, and then it will re-upload the process part to a different storage bucket. The issue is now, after about 10 to 15 minutes or 2 to 3 runs, it starts hitting a exception, which is error right after stream end. So effectively the write stream just shuts itself before it can even write any data out, and we end up with loads of empty files. And so there's Google tells you that's the exception that's happening, but I can't seem to catch it in the code. So I can't see where it's happening or why it's happening. Even more weirdly, if I redeploy the function, it works. So it just seems to be a time-based thing where almost like the stream just gets stale and dies, and then you can't do anything with it again. And even more weirdly is it will occasionally work one time, but it was about one time in about a 16-hour period it decided to work again. So it's a really weird error.
Okay, I know we talked a little bit about you trying to chop out some pieces to sort of cut it down to the least amount of code. If you had any time or luck on that?
That's on my list. My
Okay.
list seems to be expanding at the moment.
Yeah.
I had some internet issues last week as well, so I was down on capacity last week, but it's on my list.
That was,
So what's
I don't
the
know.
nature of the error that it gives? What's the nature of the error that it gives? You said it's not very helpful, but it is something.
So annoyingly, Google just gives you the exception. So Google seems to catch the exception, and it's literally error write stream after end. I think I've written it in the issue. But what the Google says is caught exception from finished function. I've got it here. Yeah. Exception from a finished function, error stream right after end. But that's it. It doesn't tell you what line it's occurred on. Doesn't tell you why it did it. There's no like stack trace at all. It just tells you there's been an exception. That's it.
Yeah, and it could be that the stream ended prematurely because of some other error that's not being indicated.
Yeah, and I did try and run with debug mode set to stream, but then that started pasting IPs into the logs, so I turned that off pretty quickly.
I wonder whether this is like there's a particular line that is triggering this, like one particular format that's not being caught by the parser, and just having one error messes up the streaming for subsequent runs. Maybe if I wonder if you were to take the log that it was working on when it errored and then run that locally with the same code, if it would show you an error for that log.
Potentially.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, you go ahead.
I was going to say it from what I understood from Ash, it's not always on this, like it's not like it tries to reprocess old files. If it fails, it just fails that file and then it's new data. So it's pretty strange that like after the 10 or 15 minutes that every new file created then has that same problem in it. But I think downloading and running them locally, it's not a bad idea to try and see. Maybe there's something that is, I don't know, it gets into some state, or we've just been super unlucky and there's always some file.
Another really brutal thing to try is to go heavy on the trycatches through the code, because it really could be something like testing a string that's not a string, or something like as silly as that in the code. So trycatch to make it like a fully safe path, and run it again, just make it no op somehow on any potential error, because it could just be it throws an error, ends the stream, and then you get that compounding error that leads to the one that you're seeing, and there's no stack trace because it's happened in the previous frame.
You did try a try-catch around everything, right, Ash?
Yeah, it's just a single try-catch around the whole function itself, pretty much.
Right.
And it returns nothing.
Is nothing okay though, or does it need to be a string or something?
No, it doesn't do anything. It's as if I haven't put it in the code.
Okay.
The try-catch, like the exception somehow still is thrown.
Yeah.
Despite that try-catch.
What issue are we talking about here? Like I haven't had my head in that code since.
It's.
And does it have the latest code in there?
Yes. So it's 2025, and I did push up the latest code to it.
Okay, cool. I'll have a look just to see if there's anything obvious. But as for GCP, I just don't have the GCP experience. So yeah.
Yeah, like we were thinking, it doesn't seem like a rate limiting thing, since it fails consistently, and I guess you said Ash, it also fails for like hours if you don't redeploy.
Yeah, I left it. So when I forgot to turn it off once, so I left it overnight. So it was about 12, 16 hours, and it worked once during that time.
But it always seems to work for the first 10 or 10 minutes, which is the worst part, right?
It was consistently, it worked for the first three run throughs, and now it's the first 2 to 3 run throughs. It will work, guarantee. So it's really peculiar.
But yeah, Rod, if you can take a look at the code, that'd be good. And Ash, you have a few things to try out, right? And I think if that doesn't work, we'll try and like you, me, Bethany, or some combination should have like spend a couple hours just trying different things. I'm sure once we figure out what it'll be like,
that's the worst thing, is I know it's going to be so simple, or it's going to be, it's something obvious.
It'll be like that, or it's like, oh, there's a huge gotcha there that everybody's going to run into, one of the two. Okay, anything else you want to share or talk about on that one?
No, once that's done, we can move on to the next step of getting that part onto the website, which should be hopefully much easier.
That's good. Okay, the next one was the OSX binaries, benchmarks. The part I thought we should talk a little bit about to start with is, like, I think we have different options in terms of, you know, the binaries, whether we want to like create another arch and have two Mac binary downloads, like one for x86, one for Intel, or I think we also have the option of creating like a bigger binary which supports both. So I don't know what people's thoughts are. I guess it's, you know, we don't need to do that in the short term, but it would be good to kind of have a view on what we think is the right answer. I mean, 2 is probably the, you know, if it wasn't for the fact that that would be another config, another build, would be better, but so it's kind of that trade-off.
Sorry, I missed the beginning of this. This is the Mac OS binary.
Yeah, like, do we want, you know, I think we have a couple choices in terms of like, we could have 2 binaries, right? You know, one for the Intel architecture, one for the ARM architecture, or we can build change the way we build our one binary so that it contains both. But it's like, I think it's going to be bigger, right?
So back in the day when Mac OS was transitioning to 64-bit, Node used to be shipped as a fat binary with both 32 and 64 in it. So I mean, there's precedent for that, and it wasn't. I think it was somewhere in, maybe it was in Node 4 or maybe in IOJS we dropped it, but we eventually dropped it, and that was nice. But this is something that Mac has done before, and users are used to it. My guess would be that most projects are going to ship fat binaries for a few years, and it's just the way that people will get used to consuming it. And I think Mac users will, because they will be used to that. It's not like they're going to complain uniquely about Node. In fact, they may say to Node, my guess would be they would say to Node, well, I'd rather not have to choose and know what device I'm running. Just give me one and let it figure out what I'm running.
Right.
So
okay.
I think my preference, I think, would be for a fat binary or a fat package, but actually, no, it'd be a fat binary, so they all go into the same binary. But I guess also watching what the Mac ecosystem does will be instructive. It's just my guess would be that they would go fat.
Right. Okay. Oh, that's good
I'm
insight.
I'm thinking MVM would probably have the similar approach there. I don't recall exactly how they handle it, but they mostly just consume what we do, and I don't think adding exceptions there is the preferred position. So I agree with Rod in that assessment.
Okay. I mean, certainly I'm happy with the fat binaries. I think I hadn't thought of the, hey, I don't even want to, like the consumer's not even wanting to worry about which one it was. I think it also means that we can, from what I understand, you can build those fat binaries on the existing Intel platform. So we could actually start to ship those sooner than later. We don't need a release machine, which is, we don't need a release DTK, which, I don't think we'd want to do anyway, since it would probably disappear, to start building it that way.
We would have to integrity check it as part of the release process, though, just to make sure that it works as intended on your architecture. Yeah,
although I don't think we don't do that necessarily for any of the other binaries today. We've gone as far as like we had a job which would download the zips and unzip them, but we don't actually execute any of them. Okay. I agree in general that we should actually be doing that for all platforms. So I'm just saying, I don't know if we need like a job that does that every time. We should obviously validate it that when we change the build info that it does. But
do we do a lot of cross toolkits when we compile it? Like, is that a common case for us?
Rod, what do we cross compile for ARM or release? Or
yes, we do.
Windows.
Yeah.
So it's the same situation there, I think.
Okay.
I'd really like us to have some binary testing, just thinking we should, this isn't necessarily any different than the other cases.
Right.
So in terms of, I guess we do need to update Xcode versions. Do you know, Ash, do you know I think you knew which versions of Xcode we need, right?
In what regard? For
to be able to build for the ARM architecture.
It will probably be Xcode 12 because that's what's on DTK right now, and nothing will run without it. It's hard to say right now because Apple in the latest update have suddenly decided to change the Intel platform new OS from 10.16 to match the ARM with 11.0. So it looks like they're trying to merge the two together, whereas they were separate. They're now under the same version number. So hopefully it looks like they're just converging Big Sur into one piece. So it should be much easier to have a fat binary as well. But that one, it will be 12 that has the support for the ARM.
Okay, and we're currently building with
11.
11, okay. And did we end up switching everything to build with 11?
Yeah. Yes. Release
okay.
wise, yeah. So the release machines have the full-blown Xcode 11, and everything else just has the developer tools.
Okay, so I'm just thinking, like, say for 15. Well, I guess it affects everything. So the question is, when should we think about it? It sounds like it's a bit early to look at updating the release machine or anything to start doing fat binaries. But what you think that is that like a month, 2 months off, or?
Yes, it's I don't even know when the official release date for the hardware is. Right. Actually. Okay. It's just been touted as late 2020, I think.
Yeah, we better not jump the gun too early on this.
No.
Yeah, we don't want to be introducing these binaries when no one's actually able to consume them properly.
Yeah.
But now, if we look back in the history of Makefile, we should be able to see the old macOS target that did fat binaries. So it did. I'm pretty sure that was all handled in the Makefile, where you just did a make build and it would do 32-bit, 64-bit. And then munge them together. So if you do get history on the Makefile, there's already interesting precedent in there. It may not be how we want to do it, and it was was it before we? I don't know. But the history should be in. Git, I think.
Okay. But it's I guess it's like we'll have a couple machines which are building in the test infrastructure, which is good. And it's probably at least a couple months, it sounds like, before we should even think, maybe in a couple months is when we should loop back to say, when do we think we should start considering releases, right? Like it sounds like that, and that might even be the end of the year. Is that if that's when the hardware's coming out? I don't know.
Yeah,
Do you remember?
just from quick search in typical Apple fashion, they just say by the end of the year. But that would be the very first ones they release.
I think the OS is due October, right? So, I mean, that doesn't mean much other than Xcode likely going stable at that point.
Mm.
Okay, so it's anyway. There's no urgency on that front. It sounds like we're in pretty good. We're in good shape from the testing perspective and from the release perspective. We've got a while before we need to do anything. And that's good. Yeah, like if I guess, and you're right, Rod, it's probably going to be similar to how they did it before. So maybe we can reuse some of that makefile stuff, which would be great. The other thing, Johan, you mentioned to talk about was like benchmarks.
No, it was just a question how to handle just finding regressions. I mean, obviously, my question wasn't from the intent of setting up like automated benchmarks. It was more like allowing people that have that interest and time to figure it out. So it's just an open
like there was at least one person on the issue in the TSC repo saying, hey, I've got some DTKs, I'm interested in helping. I wonder if that's the kind of thing we could point them at to say, one of the things you could usefully do is to run the node benchmarks and point out where there's regressions. I mean, what it'll really count on is then having some people who are eager to fix those regressions on the Mac, the OS X platform, right?
Yeah, and I'm thinking a lot of it may boil down to like V8 or dependencies anyway. So
right,
at least finding them makes sense.
Okay, so yeah, I guess like we could open, yeah, I'm just thinking of like concrete things we should do to try and handle that. And like we could open an issue basically saying, hey, look, we're interested in people to take on this work. And
yeah, I mean, that's a good effort. Just call out, see if anyone's interested that has access and wants to start reporting to us.
okay, sounds
I mean, I
good.
think that there was a bit of a community effort in terms of verifying that Node built in the first place, as the development kits were starting to float around. So perhaps we can see a similar event or like events in the benchmark and a regression field.
Yeah, no, I think, yeah, and making the call, it might bring those people together, so that'd be good.
Yeah, we just need to be able to, if whoever has access from our end to have that time and to verify it.
Benchmarks and okay, so that's one action. Anything else we should talk about on that one? Any other topics people want to get into? Because I think that's the end of the agenda.
Yeah, I've got one. Matthias opened an issue on Build about increasing the getting the GitHub bot permissions to start CI runs and things. And I kind of tried to deflect that over into, could the bot be made a member of the collaborators team? Because I believe the permissions he was asking for was to give the bot the same access to Jenkins as collaborators currently have. and I kind of feel that it's easier from our point of view if that was done at the GitHub team level, because we don't really have a good story about restoring permissions when we lock down the CI for the security releases. So at the moment, it seems that when we do that, we have to manually add back all the teams we remove when we come out that lockdown. So I would like to avoid, if possible, having more rows in the table that we have to restore when we do that. But it's just something that I sort of mentioned in case anyone else has any sort of ideas or sort of comments to make on that front, either way, whether we should just add the bot, as its own specific row, or whether we do prefer to have it managed via GitHub teams, because it's all part of the effort to try and get this commit queue started.
Right,
So
now when you say manage these versus teams, like make another team to manage it, or just put it in one of the existing teams?
So in Jenkins, we have a permissions matrix, and the jobs have rows that say if you are, so it can either be, we added to, at the moment we have a row for collaborators. So anyone in the collaborators team has certain permissions on jobs, and depending on what, certain different jobs have different permissions, but basically most of them are sort of read start jobs. And the question that the issue was originally, could the bot be given the same permissions as the collaborators? And we could do it two ways. Well, there's probably more than two ways, but one way would be to add a specific row into the Jenkins configuration specifically for the bot. Or the other way would be to add the bot into the existing collaborators team, and then it would automatically get the permissions of the GitHub team that it's in, because it's not there at the moment. But at the moment,
is there any downside to that? Because that seems like the obvious answer to me.
Yeah, no, I don't see one, which is why I suggested it. But I just thought I'd mention it because it originally came in as a request to build, and it's gone off now to raise an issue with that. I think the admin or TSC repo, because I, as far as I'm aware, what he's asking for is for the bot to have the exact same permissions as a collaborator. To which, in my mind, then it makes sense for it to be a collaborator rather than trying to duplicate the entire row of permissions in Jenkins. But I just thought I'd mention it because it is an issue on our board. It's issue 2394.
Right, now would we want to be able to remove, for the security release, remove collaborators, but still have the GitHub bot do its thing?
I really don't know how the bot's going to work in terms of the commit queue. You could, for example, see that we might want to suspend the commit queue while we're doing the security release. I don't know. It really depends on, because the security releases are normally done in the private repo, aren't they? And then we have the final try to merge everything back into the public core repo.
Right.
I'm guessing we don't want the commit queue to be running and starting jobs while we're doing that security release.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Unless it was limited to just things that were going into the security release or something, but yeah.
I guess just from a sort of naive point of view, I would say no. We would probably suspend the commit queue in the same way we suspend collaborators, but the commit queue doesn't exist yet, so maybe it could in the future be more, specialized so that we could allow it. But if we just assume it's doing something like naive, I would imagine we just treat it as an existing collaborator.
I think get it working now, and collaborator sounds like the right approach, and specialize later if it's really required. So I agree, Richard. Good call.
I would look at what consumers we have for the collaborators team. Perhaps there are, consumers we were not considering. Let's say you want to have a list of people doing things. I don't know, but perhaps that could be a good way to just come to a conclusion there.
Sorry, I didn't quite follow that.
I mean, who consumes the collaborator team? Is Jenkins the only consumer? Do we have other applications that uses that information to present the information, or any other means? So I guess what I'm saying is that, sorry.
I think in build it's just Jenkins, but I mean the collaborator team itself is used to grant write access to the actual core repo. So the people that have collaborators, the people that are in the collaborator team are allowed to read and write directly into Node.js core. So it's also it's a GitHub team, and that's the team that we use in core to control who has write access to the core repository.
Right. I guess what I'm saying is that perhaps there are other consumers of reading that group. Like, let's say you want to extract what people are working with the team, and then now we have an automation there as well.
Yeah,
Right, there's
NCU.
Yeah.
Update collaborators list on README. But that could be special cased out if somebody notices it. Otherwise, it'd be just funny to have a bot listed in the collaborators list.
Right, but not a big deal. Like, it's not. I take that over
entry, notable changes.
I'd probably take that over forcing people to have extra work, though. So
one thing we don't know,
have identified this security release Jenkins permissions change as one of the biggest hassles of the security process for build, at least. Anyways, it is a hassle. Every time we seem to mess it up somehow.
Yeah. I think I have to go update the guide anyway, because I think we've now lost the chat recall team. So that was in the matrix, and I'm going to take that out when I have some time, because that team no longer exists. It's been deleted, I think.
Which team was that? Sorry.
The chat recall team.
no, yeah.
I think we've gone through and removed the repo, or archived the repo and deleted the team, but I think we've still got them explicitly in the security matrix in Jenkins. It's not a major thing. I think it just comes and says this team no longer exists. But again, it's something just to get rid of, and then we don't have to restore it when next time we do security.
Less boxes to check, so it's worthwhile.
So the only other thing on that was Matthias asked if I think the bot is currently in its own team called bots or node bots, something like that. And he asked if we nest the team in collaborators, whether Jenkins would pick that up. And I just said, I don't actually know. I think it works, but it might not. There seem to be different issues on Jenkins issue tracker suggesting both ways. So the only real way to find out would be to test it. So I think you might push for putting the GitHub team that the bot's already inside the collaborators. So it might be a sort of nested rather than adding it directly. But if that doesn't work, then it'll be added directly.
That seems to be Matthias's last suggestion anyway, right?
Yes.
Try adding the subteam. If that doesn't work, then add it directly.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I just wanted to raise that as awareness, but it sounds like we're all happy with the current direction it's heading in.
Okay, any other issues we should talk about?
Just want to say about moving the other call forward. I will actually get around to raising the doodle this time, hopefully in time for the next meeting rather than 4 hours before it. So we can put that in the issue and at people in build, so people can post in their preferred time zones or whatever, and we can try and see if we can shuffle it around. But we'll keep this slot as is.
Sounds good. Okay, if that's it, then we'll thanks everybody for taking the time to come, and we'll talk to everybody later.
Thank you.
We check YouTube just if anything is there.
Sounds good. You're going there?
Yeah, I'm doing it now.
Sure.
No, looks empty.
I think I have one private thing that I forgot to do at the top of the hour. So when we end, just hang for a minute.
Sure. Let me stop the live stream. So thanks everybody who's watching, or now or later. Talk to you all later.